is the purpose of an education? Is it all about knowledge and all-around development? Or in this day and age, is there a lot more that people are expecting? Is its ultimate aim employment? That's, of course, our big debate, our big focus today. Joining me, Arihant and Amil, also our expert Usha Albuquerque with us. Thanks very much for coming in, all of you. Let's get started right away. Arihant, you believe that employment, in fact, is the only aim of education. That is where it all has to end. Your time starts now to explain us why. You have a minute.
Yeah. So see, at the end of the day, just like any other thing, education and employment are a situation where education is an investment and you need a return on that investment. So at the end of the day, when you do not get employment after you are educated and you are not getting any returns, as a matter of fact, you're not getting any returns on that investment, that is education that is you're making. It is either your parents or the government that is fueling that education. If you're not getting any returns on that investment, then at the end of the day, that is bad investment. Also, this idea that if you are not employed at the end of the day and you have all the wisdom in the world and you have all the knowledge in the world and you have garnered all that, there is no point in that, right? So if I have all that knowledge, if I had all that wisdom at the end of the day, but I'm unemployed and I'm sitting at my, and I'm sleeping on my mother's couch at the end of the day, this fuels discontent, this fuels like a sort of an anger in the society, a sort of anger in the youth who at the end of the day need employment, right? So that is precisely why, that is simply why, seeing the situation as an investment and a return situation, I believe that education at the end of the day is, employment at the end of the day is...
Right. Your time's up, Arihant. I have to ask you to wrap. Right, Amil, counter that. It is an investment seen in pure economic terms. This is the return I want. Why do you believe that that is not the case? There's more that you can get from education.
Honestly, I believe education is more than just a transaction that you invest something and you expect a return. I personally believe that education has two purposes. One is empowerment and second is creating dialogue. The idea is when you empower someone, when you instill in him certain values that he can critically analyze things around him, critically analyze things about himself, and he has the right kind of rationale regarding what to do about his life, he can create its own pocket of excellence that will create opportunities as per his demands, right? And as far as creating dialogue is concerned, when you have aware citizens in a society, right, when they discuss their knowledge, you create dialogue, you create intellectual gain, which eventually helps the society, because excellence in any regard will lead to certain sort of opportunities, right? And the idea is employment. You can only maximize someone's utility and productivity one and only when he's excellent in some sort of regard, right? So if we start dispensing our education with the idea that you have to get some sort of return, right? The lack of which will go ahead and make people more discontented than
Your time's up, right? Do not look at it in pure economics terms. There's just more that you can garner from education is what you're saying. There's a lot more that education offers. But let me just ask you quickly, Amil, if at the end of your study, your course, etc., you don't land up with that job, would you feel let down?
I'll explain in two ways, right? My perception regarding my job and my life goes beyond, and that's my my rationale behind it. Like goes beyond the job, right? If I go ahead and like get into research and I get into understanding, say, a village's problems, right? The kind of satisfaction and the kind of utility I will gain out of it perhaps will be much more to me than the society's perception of what my utility should be, right? A lot happens when we pass judgments on people's utility by saying he should end up with a job and he should end up with the money, right?
When we say that the role of education is to provide us employment, we are basically pushing a stereotype. This is what society expects, and we're just going with that instead of sort of trying to break away or charter our own course.
So when Amil talks about these things like empowerment and creating a dialogue in the society, so let's look at it this way, right? These are not exclusive things. When you are employed, in a way, in a company or wherever you're employed, these are not exclusive things. In a way, when you're employed, all this dialogue, all this empowerment also happens. When you are employed and when you are getting those monetary returns, you are empowered in a way that you can never be when you have all those knowledge and you still do not have a job, right? So all this is not exclusive. So when you have employment, right, you can also go ahead and self-actualize. Now also these and also these ideas that Amil talk about, these highly idealist ideas that I can be a researcher at the end of the day and not necessarily land up in a societally like stigmatized job. So the thing is that okay, no one is stopping you from going ahead and like doing a research job at the end of the day. But the sole point of discussion here is, in a developing country like India, the basic mass here, when we are talking about the basic masses here, what primarily they need out of employment, they need out of education is employment, right?
Right, and they would perhaps and they would perhaps sign up for their education, keeping that employment in mind. Ma'am, of course, we have two very well thought out and very articulate views here. But is it sort of, do we sort of come back to the way the modern education system sort of has worked around that, you know, at the end of the day, you're always promised something and sort of, you know, this is what works best. That's the pure investment and return.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Right.
Because as they both argued very well, you need that basic education to be able to get employment.
Right.
But at the same time, there are certain areas in which, particularly for a developing nation like ours, we need certain jobs for which there are very core employment skills that are required. And therefore, the education that we're getting should be able to give not only a well-rounded education, and which by education I mean the capacity to think, to innovate, to inquire, to challenge, to discover, exactly. So, and to be able to have the skills, so the knowledge and the skills to be able to get a job. And my problem is really, and I don't know where the two of you would like to look at, I think in this country, I'd like to just throw in a bit of a red herring. I think in this country we don't provide either education or employability. Because if you look at the figures, 90% of graduates in this country are unemployable. 70% of engineers are unemployable. 75% of MBA graduates are unemployable. So what are we doing? Are we providing education or employment?
Right. Arihant, respond to that. When you sort of hear those figures, do they sort of throw you off? Do you sort of stop and think again, are you on the right track, or those around you?
Yeah, so the idea that ma'am talks about, right, even if we have an education, we do not have those skills to go ahead and work with companies like multinationals, and because they are not hiring, because at the end of the day, they are only hiring from IIMs and only hiring from IITs. So the problem here is, only a very small chunk of Indian students are graduating from those institutions.
Correct.
But a large chunk of students are also graduating from institutions that are smaller, that are unheard of. So we need to, so companies are basically hiring on the basis of reputation, right? So as ma'am rightly talks about, we are not giving them the required skills in engineering or for that matter. So the problem here is the theoretical knowledge is imparted among the students, but the job applicability of those concepts that they teach in engineering or other fields is the basic problem, because vocational skills that help you earn a living are not being imparted in the education system. I completely agree with that.
Amil, also, you know, when ma'am mentioned that, you know, forget employability, there are question marks, serious question marks being raised on the kind of education that we are imparting. We've seen that we seem to be entering a phase where education is now big business. It is all about monetizing it and the money. How concerned are you by this?
This kind of links up with the kind of point he's trying to establish by saying that these are non-exclusive things. I'll tell you how these are exclusive spheres, right? When you go ahead and talk about monetizing and commercializing education, right? So you are streamlining children's thoughts into believing that, look, after you do this, after you pass class 12 with so-and-so marks, I will get some sort of investment from you, right? Because you're an investment, I will have to get some return. When you put this kind of idea within people, right, the ambit of understanding narrows down, because now people are looking at one sort of benefit only, right? And the kind of values and the skills that he's talking about that come out of education will never happen, because you are constantly reminded of a kind of future fulfillment that you have to go ahead and fulfill. Otherwise, your entire education is nullified, is proved null and void, because you haven't given that return. From what the kind of premise on which my argument is based is fact that understanding of those skills is much more important. When you know exactly what you're doing and you're understanding the kind of subject you're studying, that will create its own pocket of opportunities
for you,
which will go ahead and give you benefits in a lot more regards, right? And that benefits will be not only just like, say, money-wise, it will be social-wise, it will be intellectual-wise. So there's so many
knowledge,
spheres.
I would imagine, which would be priceless, right?
Exactly. So
and it's good to hear you say that, Amil. It's good to hear you say that, you know, where one has always believed that that is the way it ought to be. But ma'am, again, coming back to the point, you know, when you said that we're not doing either, what do you believe has been the main reason, the main failure why we seem to have sort of lost?
I think we've lost what is the goal of education itself. Amil hit on it when he talked in terms of a wider goal. But it isn't just developing skills, it is developing the ability to think. Just today, I had a young student who came into my office who told me he's just done a BTech. And as he said, I don't know what I learnt in BTech. Because even the projects, the work that we got to do, there was very little application because you can almost hire it out. You get somebody to do a project and you submit it and you pass your exam. Or, you know, now is this the attitude we have to education where the whole prospect of learning something, developing something, building skills and becoming individuals with some amount of capabilities that you can actually invest in the country doesn't really talk about just specific jobs or just for the sake of, it is for the sake of benefiting a larger goal. And that is what I think we're losing out on.
Right, Amil, you wanted to make a point.
In the book Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler clearly mentioned that a lot of our socio-economic problems and a lot of employability problems can be solved if the youngsters of today know exactly what happened back then. That is the understanding of history as to how we evolved, how our society evolved, how the governments back then and the governments now, the disparity between their functioning. So when we impart this sort of education by not showing them that there has to be some benefit, by in the immediate regard as to what they are learning. So when we learn these things, when we understand things, a lot of problems, the way we perceive problems can be changed.
Motivation, either for a larger end or for a monetary end, but much more for a personal development.
Right, I may have sort of had some disagreement with the Hitler example, but we'll save that for another debate. We'll save that. But go ahead, go ahead.
So again, going back to like whether or not they are exclusive, right? So I'm telling you, they are non-exclusive things at the end of the day. So why are they non-exclusive? At the end of the day, when you have those skills, when education imparts within you those skills that get you that job at the end of the day, then you have all those. When you have that job, when you have that money coming in, when you have that social status in the society, you have all those opportunities to interact with your peers, interact with your socials, and also go ahead and empower yourselves, empower your children, empower your families, right? So these are non-exclusive things in the regard that when you work in your own self-interest, going back to Adam Smith's theory, right? When you work in your own self-interest, you are actually working for the society's self-interest.
You can imbibe everything else that you're saying.
Right.
So. Amil, quickly, I'm running out of time, but the one thing that you could do, or you could suggest to change things the way they are.
It's very simple, right? You have to start incentivizing people not in terms of money. You have to make them understand that, look, yes, money is important, right? Productivity is important, right? But we need to tell them that your productivity can be achieved, you can be engaged in much better work if you just understanding and you're loving the work that you do. The reason why we have dissatisfied engineers and managers is because they studied for some sort of benefit. They had this entire hunky-dory image of what they will do after studying this, right? So we need to tell children that if you do not like the subject, we need to give them the flexibility, the idea of choice. We need to tell them that, look, if you want to pursue something, you should go ahead and pursue what you like, whether it's music, whether it's culinary or any sort of out-of-the-box thing as what people call it.
Right. As someone actually said, talking about music, if Mozart had gone to a public school today, his teachers would have said, great kid, you got an A in music, but you're failing PE and English. You can't just play the piano all day. So that again brings us back to the problem.
I think also, both of you need to keep in mind, large number of people in this country are in the small towns and villages where they have no choices, where the education has to be for employment. That is their livelihood. So the education has to be one which not only gives them a set of learning tools, but also empowers them to be able to take up a job. Education as a holistic development and employability with specific skills developed for specific jobs that are available to large numbers of people.
Right. That's, of course, the time that we've run out of on the big debate. But, of course, is the current education system making employment the only aim of education? You've heard what our panelists have to say, what our debaters and experts have had to say. And if you have any thoughts, keep them coming. Keep writing in to us. Well, we're slipping into a quick break now. Thanks very much for joining us all. We're back with lots more.